In this problem, we're going to use the quotient rule to take the derivative, but before I apply the quotient rule, I always remind my students that anytime you see like a radical sign, so here the square root of x, rewrite that as a power. So I'm going to rewrite all of my square root of x terms as x raised to the 1/2. Okay, so let's do that first before we apply the quotient rule to take the derivative. So I'm going to rewrite this as x squared plus 2 times x to the 1/2. Divide that by x squared minus 2 times x to the 1/2. And then now let's remind ourselves of what the quotient rule says. Quotient rule says we are going to take the derivative of the numerator. So let me just call this numerator f of x just so that we have something to name it. And then I'm going to call this denominator here g of x. Okay. Quotient rule says take the derivative of the numerator, multiply it by the denominator, and then subtract that from the numerator times the derivative of the denominator, and then divide that whole thing by the denominator squared. Okay, so let's go ahead and now take the derivative. All right, let's take the derivative of the numerator. So the derivative of x squared is 2x to the first power, plus the derivative of 2x to the 1/2 is 2 times 1/2 times x to the 1/2 minus 1. So that's the same thing as minus 2 over 2. And then I'm going to multiply that times the denominator. So that's just x squared minus 2 times x to the 1/2 power. And then I'm going to subtract that from the numerator, x squared plus 2 times x to the 1/2 power, times the derivative of the denominator. So the derivative of x squared is 2x to the first power minus 2 times 1/2 x to the 1/2 minus 1, or minus 2 over 2, and then divide this whole thing by the square of the denominator. So x squared, the denominator is x squared minus 2x to the 1/2 squared. All right, let's clean this up. Let me move over to the left here. I'm going to need a little bit more space to write. So what do we have here? I've got 2x in the numerator plus, and then 2 times 1/2 is just 1. And then I've got x to the 1/2 minus 2 over 2, so to the negative 1/2. Okay. Times x squared minus 2x to the 1/2 minus x squared plus 2x to the 1/2 times 2x minus, so here I've got that's 2 times 1/2, which is 1. So then that's 1 times x to the negative 1/2 all over x squared minus 2 times x to the 1/2 squared. Okay. All right, and then the only thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to just go back and then rewrite all of these guys that have the raised to the 1/2 power. I'm just going to rewrite them using that square root sign, that radical sign, and then we can leave our final answer like this. So in the numerator, I've got 2x plus, so that's the same thing as 1 over x to the 1/2. And remember, x to the 1/2 is the same thing as the square root of x. And then x squared minus 2 times the square root of x minus x squared plus 2 times x to the 1/2 is the same thing as times the square root of x. And then 2x minus, and again, remember, because I have this negative exponent, that's the same thing as 1 over x to the 1/2, and 1 over x to the 1/2 is just the same thing as 1 over the square root of x. And then all of this is over that denominator squared. And then again, here also I'm going to rewrite, so let me circle what I'm doing here. I'm going to rewrite that using the square root sign. So that's the same thing as square root of x squared. And then that, my friends, is our final answer. And you can just leave it like this and you're done.